to eeTV. I'm Mark Alexander here with Skylar Tanner,
Keith Norris,
and we are back again this week for some more health and fitness news. We hope to be a filter for all the information out there for you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to start off with Skylar. You had brought to our attention an NPR feature. I guess talk about it a little bit, and then we can kind of all discuss kind of our
elitist listening to NPR.
That's right. Listen to NPR. So Monday morning I'm driving in for a 6:30 client, and there's a piece about a study that was performed on the hippocampus in the brain, which is about a pinky-sized chunk buried deep in the center of your brain. That's responsible for taking everything that comes in, encoding it, and putting it way back here to be retrieved, hopefully at a later date. And what the study found was they had a control group that they said was stretching, toning, and light weight training, and I'll get to why there's no qualification for what that is. And another group that was instructed to walk 45 minutes 3 days a week. And they took an MRI at the beginning of the year, took an MRI at the end of the year, and what they found was that in the walking group, the hippocampus had grown 2% in size, while in the toning, lightweight lifting, stretching group, it fell 1.5%. So that's great. It follows up what other studies have been done. There is a 13-year long study that was done on 299 individuals in Pittsburgh, average age of about 78, and they were tracking the size of the gray matter. And they found that those who walked about 6 miles a week over the course of this study didn't find any loss of gray matter whatsoever. Anything less than that, you lost gray matter. Anything more than that didn't necessarily further your gray matter. And so at the end of the study, 183 individuals had normal cognitive functioning. So if you're talking 80 years old, that's pretty dang good. So what the take home here is that, well, the control of this NPR study is poor. Stretching, toning, if you've ever been to a normal gym, light weightlifting is very different from one person to another. Toning is impossible. I mean, that's muscular tension against the skin, so you either gain fat, you gain muscle, lose fat, or do both, hopefully. It's not trackable. Whereas these people, as they're getting better at walking, were walking further throughout the year in that same 45-minute time period. So I'd like to see a study actually set up better with hard weight training, or at least moderate intensity, something that you're working against. But cardio is good for the brain, or at least low constant movement. It doesn't surprise me that in the longest lived cultures, they're built around long, kind of slow movements and probably periodic effort as well. But they're not sitting on their duff. So,
yeah. I think it has a lot to do also with just engaging with your environment and the constant elevation change, just the continual engagement with your environment. I think that has a lot to do with brain function
Yeah. Well, and I think in this particular example, again, probably in my opinion, another reason that maybe the control and the variable were not that great is I think they just walked around the track. Now, granted, that's pretty boring stuff. I'm just curious, like you said. I mean, it seems like maybe there would be more to be had walking in an environment that's different than the monotony of the track.
And it's not. It's funny because it's I think we talked about non-exercise physical activity last week, or if we didn't, NEPA is what that's called. So these individuals, it's funny. The best part about the story was at the very end. This is the part I like. This is a year-long study. It's not a short-term study where they're doing it, just because researchers telling me to do it. You've committed to through walking 3 times a week for a year. It should be pretty well habit. They've got a 66-year-old semi-retired college professor who manages to find the time for a year, and then as soon as the researcher said, all right, you're done with the study, this time that he had magically disappeared. Like, what has changed other than, and you see this a lot in studies, where the people are fine to commit as long as, maybe you remember the study where the college students are being told by a scientist to administer higher level shocks while an actor screams in the other room, I forget. And it's because of the appeasement to authority. Literally, the responsibility is out of my hand, it's the scientist's fault. It's almost the same thing, right? They say, the scientist tells me I'm going to walk, I'm going to uphold the research. And as soon as it's done, they stop. He says, I can't find the time. I no longer do this. I just thought that was the the funniest thing.
Yeah, that is. I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't know. I mean, this is maybe have something to do with the psychology of, like you said, not just the adhering to authority, but also this guy had it in his mind that this is work, this is exercise. When in my book, what they were doing is not really exercise. So
No. I know Clarence Bass is a big fan of walking, but he doesn't. He does it for these reasons. He's sort of that, and he lives at the base of the. He lives in the Albuquerque area, and I believe the mountain range is the Sandia Mountains. Someone's going to correct me. I'm going to wiki it here in a minute. So it's not flat. It's that engagement with your environment.
Sure,
You're going up, you're going down.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not a flat suburban neighborhood.
I would love to see a study with some MoveNet stuff thrown in, and we're talking about older people, but it can be scaled back. Maybe some pulls against, maybe not pulls up, but pull against. Some push-ups thrown into some real light MoveNet stuff, and I bet that would be shown to be even better than just walking. And I'd like to see that compared to a more strenuous weight program.
Sure. Build that in your head. You could even do the flat track versus roughly 3 miles of varying terrain and varying height.
Or time, or I think they used, was it 40 minutes?
40,
I mean, you could do that, 40 minutes on the track or 40 minutes in the environment. I mean, even that, I would suspect, would have a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. So.
Well, we somewhat touched on this last time about programming, knowing your tool belt or toolboxes, as they said. In other words, there are a lot of choices, using the analogy that exercise machines or devices or body weight, these are all just tools in the tool chest. And we've, and Keith, I guess touch in on that in referencing, and we'll link up all these articles that we reference as well. There was an Elite Fitness article, Methods of Muscle. Summary of that would essentially be, you can use different modalities of training, and this was in the athletic realm. This was by Rick Dannison, who's a strength and conditioning coach. Keith, I mean, what are your thoughts about that? About kind of, first off, knowing what you have, and then programming around what you have.
So it all boils down to, number one, you need to know your goals, number one, and what tools do you have available to you. Those are the two big things, because someone can tell you to do certain exercises and use certain equipment, but if you don't have that available to you, what good does that do? So that's the first thing. Assess the tools that you have available to you, and then marry that with your goals. And having many different options, obviously the better off you're going to be, and be a little bit creative, and know that one option isn't necessarily better than another by default. All these things can be mixed and matched. For instance, I think we've touched on this before, the rusty barbell analogy. Yes, you can get a lot of stuff done with one barbell. One rusty bar, you can get a lot done. Is it necessarily the most efficient thing all the time? No. So that's another thing you need to look at. What kind of time are you willing to put into this workout, and how many days a week are you willing to do it? Here at Efficient Exercise, we have many, many, many different tools, which makes it a blast to, number one, train people, and selfishly to work out on our own. There's many different tools. And the best of both worlds is to be able to mix and match and constantly change. Constant change. But yeah, it gets back to what your goals are, what you have available to you. Those are the two big things.
Yeah, the article was almost like it was kind of the way applying the conjugate method athletically.
Sure,
in a sense, it was talking about what it was power work, it was effort work, and it was maximum voluntary intensity. And so, depending on if you isolate it in a kind of a high intensity training perspective, intensity is your ability to exert maximally with effort, not necessarily a percentage of your 1 rep max, whereas everywhere else in the training world, it's percentage of 1 rep max is intensity. And they both matter. I mean, if you're pushing 90% of your 1 rep max, you're going to be working pretty hard voluntarily. You can't sleep through that. But you could sleep through the first half of like 65% of your 1 rep max, and then it started to get hard, and you start to yield. You start to put out a lot of effort. And yeah, then what's your goal? What in that rusty barbell analogy, you can always go on YouTube and you can search up like poor African bodybuilders. And
Sure,
I mean, you go search it and you'll see these guys and they've created these barbells out of effectively pipes and old rusty wheels, and they've cobbled together old concrete plates and makeshift racks out of just whatever they get their hands on, and they're built better than a lot of people in the most high-tech gyms around because they worked hard with the tools they had.
And necessity truly is the mother of invention in that
Right.
case. I mean,
Right.
they did not have access to. They probably know about what's out there, but they don't have access to that.
No. It's like it's just that's the way it is.
Like I like to say, intensity trumps anything else.
Mhm.
And using those guys as an example, if you have the desire and you throw enough intensity at it, your tools can be lackluster.
Mhm.
And I think my last blog post, things are starting to run together here, but I think I wrote something along the lines of, I would rather see somebody work intensely at a lackluster exercise or exercise choice
Mhm.
than the best exercise choice under the situation and kind of go at it half-heartedly. So
Mhm.
intensity trumps
Mhm.
much.
Mhm. Mhm.
As you said, it's the qualifier there.
That's it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Another, again, I think, we are filtering through some of this, let's call it current, articles and research. This is back to one of those questions we get all the time. And we got to throw these in, sprinkle these in as well. 6-pack abs or 8-pack abs, whatever you want to say now. So what exercises do you do, guys? What do you think about that?
You do table presses where you push yourself away from the dinner table when you're satisfied rather than when you're stuffed, and you allow your biceps and forearms to not be as strong from the 6-pack curls as well. I mean, ultimately, you're talking about, we can. Contest-ready bodybuilders are proof that if you don't eat very much for a long enough period of time, you'll end up with 6-pack abs. Is it necessarily the healthiest way to go about it? No. Is it necessarily the easiest way to go about it? No. And they're getting that lean for a day. I mean, really, it's not meant to be something sustainable over a long period of time. So it is leanness. It is making sure that you are eating. There's an article that was posted, I think, today, and it was talking about how these gorillas, they're being fed in these zoos in a way that is species appropriate all of a sudden. They stopped feeding them foods that were so nutrient dense for a shorter portion of the day, and they started feeding them. Now, gorillas are herbivores. I mean, they got big fat guts to digest all of that plant matter. And so what they did was they had this sort of, they had this surrogate, think of it like a power bar or a food bar, effectively, for these gorillas. So they're eating a short portion of the day, but that's not how gorillas eat in the wild. They graze constantly. And so these gorillas all of a sudden are eating a lot more plant matter, but it's species specific. That's how they would eat in the wild. And they're eating a lot more of the day. They're sitting there just gobbling and gobbling and gobbling. So they're eating more calories, but because the diet is species appropriate, they've gotten leaner in spite of that. So food quality matters, food amount matters. It's easier to eat less if you're eating better stuff. Because you're satisfied on less. I mean, it's automatic, and that's how you get a 6-pack. I mean, your 6-pack is determined at birth. You go look at those body exhibits, the Chinese prisoners or wherever, but nobody knows actually exactly where they got these people from, and they've got 6-packs, and not because they did anything. It's because that's underlying all that fat. The muscle has tendinous attachments that determine the shape of your stomach. When you think about Boyer Coe. As a bodybuilder, going back to that, because they're so visible as someone who has abs.
Yeah.
This guy was contest lean 4 or 5%, and he never had a 6-pack. Not because he didn't do ab exercises, because he didn't actually have a 6-pack. There was nothing he could have done to give himself a 6-pack.
I saw a show on TLC, and this was back. TLC used to air operations. Okay, so they would film operations. And they would, I'm a geek like that. I used to love watching that show.
Yeah.
One episode stood out in my mind, and I can't remember exactly what the operation was. It doesn't matter. But they operated on a woman who was pretty well overweight, and they were going in through her stomach, cutting through layer of fat, layer of fat, layer of fat. And I remember, just as an aside, watching that show, the doctor pulled away this layer of fat and got down to the abdominal wall And guess what was under there? A nice set of abs.
Yeah.
So that, and this woman didn't work out. I mean, that's just, that's just the way the muscle is. Now, if you lose weight, they're going to appear. So that's the biggest thing is diet. Diet will give you, if you're genetically predisposed to having that form.
Yeah, it's the subcutaneous fat. It's not the exercise of choice. And
it's not to say that exercise is not important, because it is a strong core. It is very, very important.
Yeah, there are plenty of 16-year-old skinny, bony kids who have six packs, but they're not strong in any way, shape, or form with that muscle. They're proof that if you don't have much fat, you're going to have the look. I think Richard Nicolai, he called it like weaklings. He was calling it to be like people who are so concerned with this maintaining a six pack that they didn't eat enough to support their efforts in the gym. So they weren't ever getting very strong.
I think if anyone's ever seen the plug for somebody else, CrossFit, and I can't remember the deal they have on the in the rear. Anyway, it was a clip of Louis Simmons. Okay, no one's going to accuse Louis Simmons of having a six-pack at all, or probably anybody at Westside.
Yeah, he's got a cool set of tats there.
Yeah,
it's a canvas for tattoos.
But that core is rock solid strong. There's no way you cannot have a very, very solid core and maintain that kind of weight on your back or deadlift. It's just amazingly strong. Okay, they don't care necessarily about their body fat levels, other than trying to get down to their weight class. But I mean, that's a perfect example. I would guarantee if you stripped away through that abdominal subcutaneous fat, you would see.
If he was strong,
you would see.
Yes.
There's a. Yeah, I know it's on Kelly. It's on Lyle McDonald's page when he's talking about methods of mass gain, and I know Kelly Baguette on his he has a series talking about, hey, if you're skinny, and you're young, basically, you need to eat enough. Take care of this now because your hormones are only getting worse from here. And it's the powerlifter's name is Dave. Starts with a G. It's like Dave Goolage, I want to say, is his name, and there's a shot of him at a powerlifting meet, and that's not that he's that fat. I mean, he's just not ripped in any way. And then he decided he was going to get lean, and the guy lost a bunch of fat, and he had super deep, dense muscles from all that powerlifting. And his lower back, the spinal erector muscles looked like two loaves of bread running up and down his spine, which from all that heavy deadlifting, and you got to remember the lower back is part of your trunk, it's part of the core, and it was strong because it had to be strong to move that much weight, and as a result, when he was lean, he had all this muscle tissue.
And Croc, I mean,
Croc
he's an example. Not that he was ever that over fat, but I mean, I think he's also done.
He's done bodybuilding
contests. It's just, again, it comes down to what are your goals, and some of these very strong or very lean don't necessarily equal healthy. It's the athlete and
they're not doing 10,000 crunches.
No, they're not. What is it? If you look at the 5-3-1 template, he says like hanging leg raises, weighted crunches. I think evil wheels in there. Nothing having to do with crunches. Not from Windler anyway. And I know that Louis likes or when you went to the Westside thing, was it the foam roller crunch? But it seemed like that was more of a get thoracic mobility rather than.
And he also has a device that he made that's essentially like a hanging leg lift, but you're somewhat suspended a little differently. But anyway, But it's not the base of Louis' conjugate method, and it's not.
Do abs.
No. Well, another kind of one for the man team here is Mark Sisson. Mark's Daily Apple had an article. I think that was a handful of days ago now. But the sex for health benefits and improvements. Any thoughts or comments about that other than a headache's not an excuse?
Headache's not an excuse. Headache's not, this is your cure. That's the response. No, this is going to help you. This will get rid of that headache. What do they say? Stress relief, reduction for in the dude file prostate problems, What were the other things in that article?
Well, I think the dude file. I think there was a 50% decrease in cardiac. I don't think it was incident. I think it was cardiac death in a 20-year cohort study of 900 men or something like that. The frequency. I don't remember if there was a magic number.
That was like what?
It was
twice
greater
a week.
than twice or twice or greater. It was the same.
Twice
benefit.
or greater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So not unlike the walking. If you want to keep the gray matter, you got to walk at least 6 miles a week. If you don't want your heart to explode, sex twice a week.
Yeah.
There. That's. I'm a doctor in the same way Dr. John of Heart Attack Grill is a doctor, which is to say the American Medical Association does not recognize me, but that's my prescription.
Yeah.
Now the article didn't say, but I would imagine you see a pretty big decrease in cortisol, stress levels going down. So
I think it did talk about stress, but more in the terms of blood pressure decreases. Yeah.
So if you want to think of it that way, that's probably a backhanded way to get some fat loss. If the cortisol level is decreasing. Hey,
I always say that's my cardio.
What's the peri umbicular fat? Or McGuff talked about this recently. He was saying how he's starting, even though he's eating clean, he's working so much at the ER, he's starting to notice fat gain that's associated with increased stress or cortisol levels, and that your six-pack could be exposed fully.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be doing.
Sex is better than crunches.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So that answers our first question.
Better than crunches. More functional than crunches. Propagating the species, multiple angles of abdominal work. I mean, that's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes, people. So. Yeah, I mean, he had another one. Well, he had another one. I think it was also in the dude file where it was talking about how testosterone has been dropping, and he put forth two possible mechanisms. One was environmental toxins, and what was the other one? I don't know. It falls in line with the whole your grandpa was X number of percentage more man than you were.
Yeah.
And I don't. I'd have to go digging for some studies, and I could totally be wrong, but this might also tie into slightly elevated levels of... I know that more sex is more fertility, strangely enough, right? But I want to say I may have read a study somewhere where there's a slight testosterone increase over an extended period of time, much probably like the twice a week and your heart doesn't explode. It's twice a week and your testosterone is 10% higher on average or something.
Yeah.
I don't have a study on it, but I've plowed through so many. I don't know.
Yeah.
For sure, I think testosterone over time is something that also gets boosted.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and we're trying to keep our eeTV to 30 minutes or under. Just like our workouts, right? But kind of off the cuff, that we kind of covered everything. But anything else that you can think of to kind of help close out our time here? I don't know. Do you got anything?
Favorite core exercise. Get back to that real quick. I had this in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Personally, I like any kind of plank. A plank on a physio ball, or a plank in blast straps, either with your feet in blast straps, or I like having my forearms in blast straps and doing a pike out of that. That kind of core work to me is, it takes very little time, especially if you put it at the end of the workout, and if you've done any kind of overhead work or anything like that, which of course should be tight. During all of that, it's a great polisher, and you will definitely feel it. And there's not a whole lot of bend in the spine either, which is what I'm kind of in the McGill camp, where I don't think that too much spine bending is a good thing.
Well, you talk about this the lumbar spine. I was writing for this capstone project I'm working on. The lower back, the lumbar spine, the 5 thickest, strongest vertebrae at the base, above the SI joint, which is also part of the spine, but we're not going to count because it doesn't move. When you're a baby, you are you're born all wombed up, right? Your spine is actually soft letter C. And then as you get upright, your spine adjusts and eventually ossifies into what we consider normal spinal curve. So as far as the muscles of your stomach, as following that McGill function, is that if you were just meant to crunch, then you would have a hamstring, right, or a bicep, right? It would be attached one point to another, and it would do this.
It would be flexion.
It would be
That's
flexion.
dominant.
You drop, and that's all you do. But the muscles go in every which way. It's to allow multiple types of movement. But also, in the case of your lower back, you want to stabilize and resist motion. Those vertebrae are thick. They're the base of a pyramid because your vertebrae get weaker as they move up because they're supporting less weight. And they're actually interlocked. So the amount of rotation you have, depending on the source, you're talking 13 to 15 degrees at most from the lumbar spine. Up here, lots of movement. Down here, not so much. So something like not minimizing flexion. So the planks, one of the things I like to do, he's saying pike, I like to do the forearms in the blast straps, and you set up in a plank so that the straps are hanging vertically, but you pull your body weight back towards your feet. So you're doing a de facto weighted knee raise that you normally do on your back, but you're on your elbows. So you have a dynamic three-dimensional stabilization with the blast straps while also having the contractive component from pulling yourself.
I always like to use the analogy that the core ought to be like a pillar in an earthquake-proof building. Or it's meant to bend, or it's meant to flex, but not to break.
Right.
And that's really what you're looking for, and that's what you're looking to build. And I think that's the way you ought to train it as well.
Yeah, very cool. Well, good thoughts, and I guess we'll conclude and wrap up this eeTV episode 2, and we'll be back next week for more.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Bye, all.
All right.